Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Brian Liddy, and this evening we'll start with today's Ukraine update before I introduce you to this evening's guest. So, Ukraine update day 175. A Russian strike on Kharkiv destroyed a block of flats, killing at least 7 people and wounding 16 others, Ukraine's State Emergency Services said. Russia has replaced the commander of its Crimea-based Black Sea Fleet after explosions rocked the peninsula this week. Russia's RIA news agency reported that Igor Osipov had been replaced with Viktor Sokolov. If confirmed, it would mark one of the most prominent sackings of a military official in the war so far. Chinese troops will travel to Russia to take part in joint military exercises unrelated to the current international and regional situation, China's defense ministry has said. Ukrainian authorities performed disaster response drills near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant on Wednesday. This followed repeated shelling at the Russian-occupied plant, the largest of its kind in Europe. The 19-kilometre Kerch Bridge connecting Crimea to the Russian mainland is illegal and must be dismantled, Ukrainian presidential aide Mikhailo Podolyak has said, adding, "Not important how, voluntary or not," which implies that the bridge was a military target for Ukrainian forces. The top official in Russian-annexed Crimea has claimed the FSB security service has broken up a 6-person terrorist cell of a banned Islamist group, suggesting a link to the series of strikes on Russian bases and other infrastructure across Crimea that Russia has sought to blame on sabotage. At least 12 Russians were reportedly killed in a strike on a base in the occupied city of Kakovka, according to the Ukrainian military. Ukraine has not lost any US-supplied HIMARS rocket launchers, the Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov said in contradiction to Russian claims. The mayor of the village of Verkino Rogachisk, excuse me for my mispronunciations, in the Kherson region has been kidnapped, according to the deputy chair of the regional council, Yuri Sobolevsky. Svetlana Ivanova was taken from her home at about 11 a.m. on Tuesday. The leaders of Ukraine, Turkey and the United Nations are meeting to review the grain export deal in Lviv today. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, Zelensky and the Russian President Erdogan will also discuss the need for a political solution to this conflict and the situation at the Russian Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. The UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric said, Russia foresees a 38%, I'm sorry, I've got my phrasing wrong. The next item is, Russia foresees a 38% rise in energy export earnings this year due to higher oil export volumes, coupled with rising gas prices. Russia's earnings from energy exports are forecast to reach $337.5 billion this year. That's a 38% rise on 2021. So I'm pleased to say that we're joined tonight by our regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Chris, how are you doing?
I'm absolutely fine, Brian. Good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to see you too. So let's move on to our next story. 2/3 of all UK households will be trapped in fuel poverty by January, with planned government support leaving even middle-income households struggling to pay their bills, according to research. It shows 18 million families, the equivalent of 45 million people, will be left trying to make ends meet after further predicted rises in the energy price cap in October and January. An estimated 86.4% of pensioner couples are expected to fall into fuel poverty, traditionally defined as when energy costs exceed 10% of a household's net income, and 90.4% of lone parents with two or more children. The new study by the University of York also shows huge regional variation in the cost of living crisis, with 57.9% of households in the southeast predicted to be struggling with energy bills by January, compared with 70.9% in the West Midlands. 72.8% of those living in Scotland will fall into fuel poverty by the turn of the year, with only Northern Ireland having a larger percentage at 76.3%. The figures come after inflation soared to a 40-year high of 10.1%, heaping more pain on households as the cost of food, energy and fuel continues to rise. Commenting, the SNP's Shadow Chancellor Alison Thewlis MP said, This truly horrifying study must finally alert the UK government to come out of hiding and address the Tory-made cost of living crisis. So far, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have done nothing to ease the squeeze for households, with rising bills and soaring inflation reaching levels not seen since Margaret Thatcher. There can be no more delays. The Prime Minister and Chancellor must finally recall Parliament and deliver an emergency budget which will freeze the energy price cap rise, scrap VAT on fuel, and deliver meaningful and long-lasting financial support to households. So, Chris, these are staggering figures indeed, aren't they? 90.4% of lone parents, this is in the whole of the UK, 86.4% of pensioner couples, and 72.8% of all people living in Scotland, it seems, are going to go into fuel poverty. What will it take, do you think, for this Westminster government to do something?
Nothing. Honestly, Brian, really, these percentages could be, significantly higher, and the Tories would still sit on their hands. There was another alarming statistic that fuel poverty in the UK is expected to affect 90.4% of lone parents with two children or more come January 2023. And yet the Tories are, as I say, sitting on their hands. This is a cop out. I honestly do believe that this is a cop out, and it's a deliberate cop out by Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, because, and I wholly suspect, I think viewers will remember me saying this, that Liz Truss will be crowned Prime Minister of the Empire, is so that she can announce the action that's going to be taken and champion that as one of her one of the first things that she does when she takes up that high office.
I've heard a few commentators put that theory forward, Chris, and I can certainly see where they're coming from. But do you think also just the fact that they are willing to even wait this long, doesn't it maybe also show that they simply don't care? Or is it something that we don't know about yet coming down the line? Is there some unknown reason?
No. I mean, that is it in a nutshell, Brian. They simply just do not care. It is propagating a class war. That it's the survival of the fittest, and the elites are unaffected by the rising house cost of living at this moment in time. And make no bones about it, the elites make up the majority of the Tory support. So therefore, if it's not broken for them, then why should they fix it?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things turn out at the next general election. That's for sure, I think. So the next story is a director at energy regulator Ofgem, has resigned, accusing Ofgem of favouring businesses over consumers with a rule change that will add as much as £400 to the average UK household energy bill. Christine Farnish, a non-executive member of the Gas and Electricity Markets Authority, GEMA in other words, which is off GEM's board, tendered her resignation to the UK Government Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng in early August. Farnish said the regulator gave too much benefit to companies at the expense of consumers, according to a leaked internal Ofgem announcement. Across the UK's 27 million retail energy customers, a £400 annual bills increase could cost households more than £10 billion. Ofgem is under pressure after being blamed by some critics for not preventing the collapse of 29 energy suppliers since mid-2021. The crisis is expected to worsen, with rising global energy prices pushing the energy price cap to more than £4,200 in January, according to estimates, which is more than double its current level. The bill increase is expected to add to inflation, which reached 10.1% and deepened the cost of living crisis facing the UK. The regulator has faced repeated criticism that it is putting business interests ahead of consumers, in particular with plans to increase the updates to the price cap from twice to 4 times a year. Consumer rights expert Martin Lewis has previously accused it of selling consumers down the river. It is understood that she objected to a change to the methodology used to calculate the price cap, which determines the average annual cost paid by households. Under the change, energy suppliers will be able to charge customers for extra backwardation costs that they incur when securing supplies in advance. It's a word that I've never come across before today. Ofgem told her that all but 2 UK energy suppliers would collapse this winter if the £400 charge was not brought in, according to a government source. Ofgem has previously argued that not allowing energy companies to charge would cause further and significant financial pressure on an already strained market. Excuse me, there was quite a lot to take in there, Chris. First of all, maybe that word backwardation. I didn't get to do much digging into that word and what it actually means, but maybe you can help me out. I think it might mean that when energy companies buy in bulk in advance, either gas or electricity, at a certain price, and then by the time they maybe come to sell it on to us, the value of that energy might have dropped. And so what they're going to be able to do with this backwardation is they're just going to pass any losses on to us. Do you think have I got it right there? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I think that's the way that I would understand it, and I thought it was at first a Freudian slip on your behalf, but we'll skip over that one. What really strikes me about this story is the fact that her resignation, leaving the post, has not been publicly. Uh, uh, Reported, and yeah, I mean, her letter went straight to Kwasi Kwarteng, but yeah, there's not an awful lot of people know that somebody within Ofgem has actually got a backbone to say, I can't swallow any more of this, and I need to obviously have a good think to myself and change the direction of my career.
So, Chris,
And it shows that some people have got some morals and some scruples.
yeah, so Chris, I mean, that is kind of the next thing I wanted to ask you is like, so Farnish resigned earlier this month, and you're kind of touching on it there. Why do you think it's taken this long for us to hear about it? And maybe just before, because we don't have a lot of time left, but do you agree that the regulator Ofgem is putting business interests ahead of consumers? But I don't know. Do you think this leak would have been sanctioned by Kwasi Kwarteng?
I think it would have been almost certainly, maybe not Kwasi Kwarteng, but it might have been actually sanctioned by the Boris Johnson administration. It's definite. It sounds to me like Whitehall have been sitting on this and have not really wanted it to be made public knowledge, until such times as a new prime minister is in, they could sort of like paint it as some sort of reshuffle or some reorganisation or whatever. So it is quite sinister the fact that it happened a couple of weeks ago, and now it's just coming to light. So I mean, yeah, one could draw all sorts of conclusions from a story like this.
Yeah, you would, but the way things tend to go, I'm sure most of us think that there will be some kind of like political reasoning behind it, why somebody's done it. Or as you say, maybe it is just somebody said, look, this has got to be put out there. I've now got an official definition of backwardation. So I promise I did not make that word up. Backwardation is when the current price of an underlying asset is higher than prices trading in the futures market. Backwardation can occur as a result of a higher demand for an asset currently than the contracts maturing in the coming months through the futures market. So I think we more or less got it right.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll move on to the next story. Rail passengers were left facing another day of disruption as RMT union leader Mick Lynch warned the dispute could go on indefinitely unless ministers intervene in talks. Only 20% of train services were running due to strike action that saw more than 45,000 rail workers, who are members of the Rail, Maritime and Transport (RMT) and TSSA unions, walk out on Thursday. Commuters were told only to attempt to travel if absolutely necessary, with further disruption planned on Friday and for the weekend. In London, bus drivers and London Underground workers are also due to go on strike in the coming days. Lynch, the RMT's General Secretary, said the strikes could be prolonged indefinitely unless the government ends its stance of refusing to get involved in negotiations. Speaking from a picket line outside Euston Station in London, Lynch said, "Using taxpayers' money to satisfy the anti-union agenda of the Tory party and seek to break the trade unions is shameful and means the dispute will be prolonged indefinitely as the train companies don't lose a penny as a result of the industrial action and therefore have no incentive to settle the disputes." Although ScotRail is not involved in the dispute, there were only 20% of trains running in Scotland as staff at the UK government-owned Network Rail were on strike. Network Rail operate the stations and maintain the tracks and infrastructure of the rail network in Scotland. So, Chris, has Mick Lynch acknowledged or made it clear that these disruptions in Scotland are not caused by ScotRail, but are instead due to the Westminster government-owned Network Rail, do you think?
Maybe not. Maybe not in this instance. Excuse me. He certainly made it abundantly clear on Tuesday night. I attended the open meeting of the RMT at the Renfield Centre. Contrary to popular belief, I wasn't in Perth. But he was fantastic to listen to. He was very passionate, obviously, and very articulate in how he pointed out that I mean, this debacle, involving Network Rail and the union members of the predominantly the RMT, is prorogated by the Tory government. And unfortunately, this strike has been caught up in the Tory leadership debates and has been completely sidetracked. Pardon the pun there. But again, it's not going to be addressed whilst they are, clamouring to elect the newest prime minister of the empire. So I mean, this will roll on you know, again, at least for another couple of weeks, if not, another couple of months.
It's,
Again, what it is the Tories dumbing down on the class war, which has existed since Victorian times. The fact that workers are expected to accept meager wages in order to make huge profits for big companies, and be happy to do so,
it's,
and not be recompensed for their loyalty, their skill, their due diligence. They are to have no recognition. They are just basically to be seen but not heard, and this is wholly unacceptable in today's modern society. You cannot treat people like that. People are not rats. To
yes.
quote the great Jimmy Reed.
Chris, it's interesting though that that's the second time this evening that you've picked up on two different stories, and both of them have got the Tory government, the Westminster government, not acting to do something and to sort something. So do you think they're connected, or is this their modus operandi, or is it a fluke?
The modus operandi at this moment in time of the Tory government is to do nothing. Completely sanitize everything. For the next 2 or 3 weeks, however the hell long we have to wait, for this, in my opinion, unelected Prime Minister of the Empire is announced, and only then will certain issues be addressed. I personally think it's going to be Liz Truss. So I reckon that as soon as she's going to get in, she will formulate an emergency budget to try and meagerly address the cost of living crisis, the rising energy bills that people are seeing on a day-to-day basis, and that'll be her first. What's the one? What's the word? Feather in her cap. The train dispute will be, again, I'm sorry for the pun, it'll be further down the track. It is not a priority for the Tory government to give parity of esteem to uh, 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 manual workers. So that'll be kicked into the long grass.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because I made the point the other day there, that in my own adopted Republic city of Liverpool, the Arriva bus company has actually given 8.6% pay rise to their drivers.
Chris,
So if a corporation can do that, that shows that there's a political will in order to come to a resolution on a dispute. Now,
I think that
if a bus company can do that, surely a rail company can do the same.
yeah, I think there's a story coming up. In fact, it might be the next one that will maybe give us a chance to kind of talk about this, the kind of differences between bodies that act and bodies that don't act. The next story is a majority of Scots do not trust either Labour or the Tories to reduce their household costs, a new poll suggests. An Ipsos Mori poll suggests that 77% of people in Scotland who responded to the poll do not trust the Tories to reduce their bills and costs, while 59% do not trust the Labour Party to bring down their family's cost of living. This follows a GB-wide trend shown in YouGov polling, which found that people think neither Labour nor the Tories are able to deal with the cost of living crisis. It comes as a report from the University of York found that 72% of households in Scotland could be trapped in fuel poverty by the time the January price cap increase is introduced. Commenting, SNP MSP Michelle Thompson said, "Neither the Tories nor Labour have the answers that thousands of families across Scotland are looking for to reduce their bills and for their shopping to be affordable." Westminster is failing the people of Scotland once again, with stark warnings that nearly three-quarters of households in Scotland could be trapped in fuel poverty by January next year. The government is sitting on its hands whilst costs spiral. Meanwhile, the Tories are too busy deciding which Margaret Thatcher cosplay they would rather have as Prime Minister. So, Chris, I'm tempted to just ask you the question that was asked in the poll that came up with this, just quickly. The question was, to what extent, if at all, do you trust each of the following political parties to reduce you and your family's cost of living? And then it gives you, all the different parties. But the options to answer you have are: do you, is it a great deal, a fair amount, not very much, not at all, don't know? So where would you come in on that scale?
I would come in with the not at all routine. I don't. Obviously, I do not trust the Conservative Party to be representative of the ordinary man, woman in the street. And Labour, unfortunately, UK Labour as a whole, seems. Wait a minute. Seem, they seem inept and unwilling to take the side of the workers. I mean, you only have to look at Keir Starmer sacking one of his MPs for standing on a picket line and showing solidarity with the RMT. I find that deeply repugnant. To be quite honest with you, as a trade unionist, all my life, I would expect support from the party of trade unions. So I mean, honestly, no, I wouldn't trust any of them as far as I can throw them.
Thanks,
And
Chris.
that would I would have to level that charge at the Liberal Democrats as well. We can't forget the fact that they were in bed with the Tory party, at the height of the last recession. So they're not exempt from blame in any such way, shape, or fashion either.
Yep, that's a good point. And time's a bit tight, but this was the question where I thought we might get a chance to talk about the disparity between governments that act and governments that don't. So the SNP recently announced a number of measures that they plan to take to tackle the cost of living crisis. They're going to have an emergency budget, for example. But won't this mean that money already allocated in the Scottish budget is now going to be taken away? So some things that the SNP Green manifestos have committed to are no longer going to happen. Or do you think, are we going to be able to get extra money from consequentials in the Barnett formula or something? Or I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I would very much doubt that we're going to get any extra money from through the Barnett consequentials. I wouldn't bet my house on that. But it is important to point out, Brian, the fact that the Scottish Government have given COSLA extra money in order to try and bring a resolution to some of this strike action that we see in Scotland, more notably. I mean, we've talked at length about the RMT tonight, but also I notice that the refuse workers in Edinburgh are now out on strike as well. It has to be made known that the Scottish Government have given extra money to COSLA, who pay the refuse workers, teachers, and the likes, and all the rest of it. Extra money has been given by the Scottish Government, and Labour have chosen to influence COSLA by saying don't accept that money. We
And
would
Chris,
much rather these strikes go on rather than coming to a general resolution.
and Chris, I think you're. Tell me if I'm wrong, but yeah, the First Minister recently did say that money had been given to deal with this to councils and urged that the councils should part with that cash so that it comes to good use. But it seems that the councils are maybe holding back? I don't know the details, but would these maybe be councils where the Labour and Tory parties have got together to keep out the SNP? You might know more about that than I do.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that situation up, Brian, because yes, it is predominantly councils being cajoled by Anas Sawar and his branch office staff to instruct councils not to make that money available for local resolutions to be local striking action to come to a resolution. So,
That kind of
it's wholeheartedly correct that you point that out.
it kind of
And
feeds nicely into the next question, Chris. If you want, we could move on. It's
all right,
it's almost like a
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Okay, 'cause that will help us have more time for talking. So, Anas Sarwar has been urged to stop playing political games over council workers' pay and support SNP proposals to offer a 5% rise, just as we were saying. Mr Sarwar had called on the Scottish Government to act on its moral duty to tackle the cost of living crisis, despite his own Labour Council colleagues on COSLA siding with the Tories to offer just 3.5%. The SNP councillors on COSLA had proposed 5% after the Scottish Government provided £140 million extra funding a year. Commenting, SNP MSP Graham Day said, Anas Sarwar has some brass neck. He has failed completely in his own moral duty to support council workers in getting a decent pay rise through his party's backroom deals with the Tories. It beggars belief that Labour continue to team up with the Tories at COSLA to reject giving these workers 5% and offer just 3.5% instead. The Scottish Government is providing funding for council workers to get the fair rise they deserve, he said, but instead of supporting that, Labour has chosen to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Tories again, screwing over council workers across the country. There is no getting away from it. Anas Sarwar and Labour are failing in their moral duty to support vital workers. He and they must stop playing political games with the livelihoods of some of our most essential workers and get back the 5% increase. So, Chris, yeah, as we've been saying, yet another example of disparity between the Labour Party in Scotland and the SNP, would you say?
Yeah, and as you know, what I've said all along, it is grievance politics for the sake of grievance politics. And Anas Salwar is not bringing anything new to the table. He has proven time and time again that he's not willing to constructively work with the SNP, to bring about any resolution to any issue out with, be it strike action or be it infrastructure projects or trying to tackle the cost of living or even the drug policy, how to tackle that. It seems to me that they are not constructively engaging with the Scottish Government deliberately in order to pursue this grievance agenda that they call it wee man syndrome if you want. Being the third party position, not even being second. It's a sad indictment of Labour to say that the Tories are more popular than Labour at this moment in time in Scotland. I think that is really, really quite a statement. To be fair,
Chris,
as an ex-Labour voter, as an ex-Labour trade unionist, I didn't leave Labour. Labour left me. That's that is one of the biggest statements that has stuck with me throughout my political career.
and Chris, maybe just briefly, because time and all, where does Keir Starmer fit in all this in his relationship with the leader of the Scottish Labour Party?
Well, I mean, I read an article about, I think it was John Curtis, was spouting some of his facts and figures that Labour would need at least 25 MPs in order to swing the Westminster vote into their favour and become the party of government. I cannot see Scotland voting for two Labour MPs, let alone 25. It's just wholly inconceivable given the current track record of the Scottish Labour Party at this moment in time.
And I think
People are
it's
not as dumb.
yeah,
People are not as dumb as to think that by voting Labour they will get some sort of benevolent treatment and all the rest of it. Labour will do exactly the same as what they've always done to Scotland and use Scotland as a carpet mat in order to wipe their feet on.
yeah, and I think it's been established. There are Westminster government statistics that have shown that the way that Scotland votes in general elections has only influenced the outcome of a general election twice in something like the past 60 odd years. So
Yeah.
we'd better move on. So findings by Scotland's chief statistician for 2021-22 include there were 28,882 households assessed as homeless or threatened with homelessness. That's an increase of 840, which is 3% compared to 2020/21. But still below pre-pandemic levels, which was 31,612 people in 2019/20. There's going to be a lot of figures in this, forgive me. Of the 28,882 homeless households, 63% of applicants were aged 25 to 49, 67% were single person households, 85% of applicants were of white ethnicity, and 52% of applicants had at least one support need. There were 13,945 households in temporary accommodation at the 31st of March 2022. That's a 4% increase compared with 13,359 people on the 31st of March 2021. This compares to 11,665 people on the 31st of March 2020. The number of children in temporary accommodation has increased, and the number of children in temporary accommodation has increased to 8,635 in March 2022 from 7,385 in March 2021. That's 17%. This compares to 7,280 on the 31st of March 2020. There has been an increase in those becoming homeless from a private rented tenancy. That's 15% now, compared with 11% in 2021, almost reaching pre-pandemic proportions of 16%. One contributory factor is likely to be the end of the ban on evictions imposed by emergency COVID legislation, which was lifted on the 17th of May 2021. There has been a decrease in rough sleeping, with 2,129 households reporting rough sleeping during the previous 3 months and 1,304 the night before the application. Both of these are the lowest in the time series since 2002. Commenting, Housing Secretary Shona Robison said, "These statistics remind us why our commitment to prevent and end homelessness is so important and show us that we still have work to do." Excuse me. While it is encouraging that rough sleeping is at its lowest level in 20 years and repeat homelessness is at a 10-year low, I am deeply concerned at the increase in the number of children in temporary accommodation. This is especially disappointing as 20 local authorities are managing to reduce the use of temporary accommodation. We're also focused on preventing evictions into homelessness. Our tenant grant fund was set up to help people facing difficulties as a result of COVID-19, and we've made some of the safeguards against eviction brought in at the start of the pandemic permanent through our Coronavirus Recovery and Reform Act. So, Chris, again, and viewers, apologies for those statistics. Not really very easy to kind of picture, But again, do you think here? I mean, I'm a wee bit confused, Chris, because I mean, I did think I was led to believe that homelessness was eradicated during the big COVID lockdowns, and yet here, with figures are back, and yet it does seem that there is some progress from what Shona Robison was saying. Do you
There
think?
is some progress, Brian, but not as much as what I personally would like to see. And speaking as someone who has been homeless before, it's a subject that's really quite close to my heart. And I believe the Scottish Government could do a whole lot more, with regards the issue of homelessness. There are so many empty retail shop units that could be redeveloped and redeployed as temporary accommodation. In some cases, many of them could be made permanent. And again, that would go a long way to taking poor, unfortunate people off of the streets. Now, again, we have to realise the fact that some of the people on the streets do it through choice, and an awful lot of them. About 52% of people that are homeless do have support needs. So we must be cognizant to the fact that there are some people on the streets who have mental health illness, which prevents them from making the astute choice of having a permanent roof over their heads. And we have to take that into consideration, and we must recognise it.
Thanks, Chris.
Again, the shocking statistic there again is 67% of households of a single person. 28% of them are households with children. And again, we have to recognise the fact that some of the homeless people are actually children under the age of 16.
Yeah,
And the again, that is reflective on the percentage of 63% from 25 to the age of 49. So again, I think that whilst we have to recognise the fact that the Scottish Government are making some inroads, a lot more could be done
yeah.
on this.
Maybe we need to kind of hold on to the fact that there's been a decrease in rough sleeping, and but I certainly don't envy the people in the Scottish Government that are going to have to make these difficult decisions with the new emergency budget. But I'll move on to the next story. Thanks, Chris. Oh, thank you also for your honesty about having been homeless at one point. It's sobering. Yeah. So, Israeli forces have raided the offices of six Palestinian human rights groups in the occupied West Bank that it previously accused of being terrorist organisations, a move decried as an appalling attack on Palestinian civil society. Property belonging to the prominent advocacy groups was confiscated and entrance doors sealed by soldiers in the early hours of this morning. At the offices of Al-Haq, which is an internationally respected human rights organisation based in Ramallah, the front door was welded shut and a Hebrew statement left saying it would remain closed for security reasons. The minister of an Anglican church on the ground floor of the building, which rents the space to Al-Haq, said the church was also raided and its glass doors smashed. In October, Israel outlawed Al-Haq. Adamir, which advocates for Palestinian prisoners. It's a list of other things that Israel outlawed. So they outlawed Al-Haq, Adamir, which advocates for Palestinian prisoners, the Union of Palestinian Women's Committees, the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, the Baisan Centre for Research and Development, and Defence for Children International, which is Palestine, DCIP. Israel argued the groups had ties to the Militant Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, which is a secular left-wing movement with political and armed wings. Israel has called for the PFLP a terrorist organisation. Sorry, I'll read that again. Israel has called the PFLP a terrorist organisation. However, Israel has provided little evidence to back up the accusations. All 6 organisations deny the allegations, and 3 have challenged the designation in Israel's courts. Last month, a group of EU member states that fund some of the Palestinian organisation's activities rejected the Israeli claims, saying that a free and strong civil society is indispensable for promoting democratic values and the two-state solution. The European Commission restored suspended funding to Al-Haq in June. The EU is also expected to continue working with the other affected groups. Later, staff from Al-Haq removed the metal sheet covering its office door and vowed to get back to work despite the seizure of computers and other equipment. So, Chris, this, what do you think the main point to be taken with this is maybe not the, well, first, what I maybe take from it is the broad range of the organisations that were banned. A lot of them seem to be the kind of organisations that you would maybe want to be working in your country, and also the fact that the European Union has now disagreed that these organisations should be banned. Have you got anything that you'd
Yeah,
like to
no, I
add?
mean the point that you read out there, Brian, was well made. As the fact that El-Haq is actually a widely respected organisation, from within the European Union and outside as well. The other thing that we have to take away from this story is the fact that the allegations that the Israeli government are levelling are at this moment in time unsubstantiated. So, there really is very little credible evidence to attach El-Haq to anything untoward, shall we say. So again, for me, I think it's just, again, another unfair tactic that the Israeli government are leveling at the Palestinian people in general, and going after a well-respected organisation such as this to take away their telecoms and their computers and stuff like that, is uh, wholly irresponsible, and it does nothing for the relations between the Palestinians and the Israeli people in order to get around to at least discussing a two-state solution.
Yeah, it seems to be almost an exercise in how not to resolve conflict. But
Yeah.
so time is against us. So moving on. Thank you, Chris. Alan Weisselberg, the financial officer of Donald Trump's company and one of Trump's most trusted executives, pleaded guilty to tax violations today, further complicating the ex-president's legal woes. Weisselberg has worked for the Trump family for 5 decades. He was charged with accepting more than $1.7 million in off-the-books compensation from the former president's company, including untaxed perks like rent, car payments, and school tuition. Quizzed repeatedly by Judge Juan Merchan about whether he and the Trump Organization had committed criminal conduct in relation to the charges, Weisselberg repeated again and again, "Yes, Your Honor." Weisselberg pleaded guilty to 15 charges and faced a 15-year sentence. Under the agreement, he is expected to serve a 5-month prison term at New York's notorious Rikers Island jail. He will also have to pay back close to $2 million in taxes he owed, prosecutors said in court. The Trump Organization is preparing to go to trial in October, facing similar charges of illicit business practices, and as part of the agreement, Weisselberg has agreed to testify against the company. He has refused to testify against Trump himself. The Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, whose office brought the charges, said Weisselberg used his position at the Trump Organization to bilk taxpayers and enrich himself. Bragg said the plea agreement directly implicates the Trump Organization in a wide range of criminal activity and requires Weisselberg to provide invaluable testimony in the upcoming trial against the corporation. "We look forward to proving our case in court against the Trump Organization," he said. Weisselberg's guilty plea adds to a whirlwind of legal problems now surrounding the former president. The Justice Department is investigating whether Trump violated the Espionage Act by storing top secret documents at Mar-a-Lago, his Florida home. And this week, Trump's former attorney, Rudy Giuliani, testified before a grand jury in Georgia, where he is a target of a criminal investigation related to efforts to invalidate Joe Biden's electoral victory in the state. And in September, the House committee investigating the January 6 insurrection will reconvene its hearings amid charges that Trump incited a mob to attack the Capitol in an attempt to delay or stop certification of Joe Biden's election win. So again, a lot to take in there, Chris. But what do you think has brought about this change in Weisselberg's position? You know, that somebody who's taken money from Trump's company and now is quite happy to stand up in court and admit it.
I don't know. It's a real strange one, and you know, I mean, I've been sort of like keeping an eye on what's been happening over in America. Obviously, there was a wee by-election, a small matter of a by-election earlier on this week, and that went Trump's way. Apparently, he sort of like top-loaded one of the candidates and managed to topple one of the incumbents. So you know, and then again, I'm hearing stories about the fact that Trump, these ongoing investigations and Trump pleading the fifth and all the rest of it is going to make his political comeback even more difficult. So I mean, I find this all really quite, you know, curious, from a kind of like morbid point of view. Actually, it's it just seems to be an ongoing sort of like sideshow. Every day there's Trump seems to do something, which could possibly be seen as productive. And then it's the classic Glasgow drunk routine, where he gets one step forward and two steps back.
Yeah, and I'm struggling to remember. I think it was a senator who lost a recent vote, and she said that she. What was that? The voice in my ear. Sorry, what was that again? Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney, who's a really important critic of Trump. Yeah, she's lost her seat, and she said that she said that she thought she. Yeah, she said that she thought she could have won it if she had just repeated Trump's lies, as the person who won it did.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah, and obviously our more famous husband, Dick Cheney, uh, or father, should I say? Actually, aye. But I mean, he comes from a different age of American politics. That if they were to be in that period and possibly look at this period, I think they would, be absolutely rolling about on the floor in complete hysterics of laughter.
yeah,
I mean, again, I use the word sideshow because it really does. American politics to me, and make no mistake, I don't think that American politics has evolved much since the days of Ronald Reagan.
yeah, and I think there's Chris. I think there's another side show emerging as well. But if I'm right in thinking that Sarah Palin is back in the fray again recently. But there's one more story that I'd really like to find time to
Sure, sure,
is
sure.
that okay if we move on? So um, longer term projects that aim to transform Scotland's natural environment can apply for a share of funding in the latest round of the Scottish Government's Nature Restoration Fund. Grants of over £250,000 are available to larger scale initiatives that restore and protect habitats and species, including freshwater and coastal and marine areas, also to control invasive non-native species and reverse the loss of lowland biodiversity in urban areas. The multi-year Nature Restoration Fund is open to projects that help Scotland's species, woodlands, rivers and seas back on the road to recovery. Biodiversity Minister Lorna Slater said, "The Nature Restoration Fund is Scotland's largest ever fund for nature and a vital opportunity to take positive action now and halt nature's loss. It supports projects across Scotland, large and small, on land and at sea, that address the twin crises of biodiversity loss and climate change." Well, Chris, I mean, this is a good news story coming from the Scottish Government and the SNP Green Alliance. I'm sure we'd all agree with climate change and after COP26 that this kind of action is important. But harking back to an earlier story, I'm just worried that this is going to come a cropper when or projects like this or funding like this is going to come a cropper when we get to the emergency budget from the SNP and the
Yeah,
Greens.
I think you're very wise to take that into consideration, Brian. I mean, these projects are vitally important. The knock-on effect from biodiversity is incredible when you actually think outside the box a wee bit. The ongoing effects to local communities and stuff like that, and also to the wildlife and the plant life as well. So I mean, it's right to take recognition of the fact that vital projects such as this could be further down the pecking order as more. I mean, I don't really want to say more important projects are on the horizon, but by the same token, it might not be high up on everybody's priority of agenda. Given the fact that we are struggling with the cost of living, the rising cost of energies, fuel hikes, and the petrol pump and all the rest of it. But again, if we totally dismiss this kind of sort of like casework, in years to come, we will hugely miss out because again, from biodiversity work such as this, we could possibly develop, a good sustainable non-fossilized fuel, which could be used in a number of areas, in various communities across the country. So I mean, yeah, I think it's to be widely accepted the fact that the projects such as this are gaining a bit of momentum. Again, I think I have to congratulate you for thinking outside the box and and not wishing upon the stars, in all sort of like one fell swoop.
Well, Chris, I'm right back at you. I have to thank you because for kind of making the point. It sounds like that the economy and the cost of living crisis is just as important as ecology and biodiversity. It's like I think they both need to be tackled. I would probably say, but I'm not here as a to give my opinion. So forgive me. Anyway, thank you for joining us, Chris. It's been really good.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, Brian. Really good. Thank you very much.
So we'll see you again sometime soon.
Sure.
Thank you. So that's it for this evening. But before I go, I just want to remind you that we at Broadcasting Scotland depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Seriously, sincerely. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. So you'll see the address to make those contributions on the screen below, www.broadcastingscotland.scot/register. So That's it from Scotland at 7 here in Cowcaddens. So good night and thank you for watching. Oh, Chris. Thank you once again for joining us.
No, honestly, thank you. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thanks.
Okay. Good night, folks, and we'll see you again soon tomorrow night. Thank you.